Picking the right typeface used to be simple, except it never really was. Fortunately, there are some great patterns in both typeface selection and typography in general that help us navigate what is without a doubt one of the most interesting and diverse areas of visual design. Enter typography, the German word for nothing because the word came from the French. We're going to cover display typefaces like headings and text typefaces like paragraphs. Then we'll talk about superfamilies. We'll cover the term typeface versus the term font. Then wrap up with some typography best practices that you can apply to anything. We'll start with the first one. And for on-screen use, like in web design, there are two types of groupings, and they're based on your intention. If you're intending to use the font on a heading, or maybe a logo, in those cases, we'll usually call these display typefaces. They might not be easy to parse, especially in long sentences or paragraphs, but on their own, they can make a big statement. That's a display typeface. The second kind is text, a text typeface. We have a display typeface for larger sizes, these are things like headings, and a text typeface, which is great for things like paragraphs. The difference is this. These typefaces have to be very legible because we have to parse large chunks of this stuff at a smaller size. Let's do an experiment. Here's a heading with a particular typeface. It's more decorative, but it works. And now here's the same thing, a lot smaller in a paragraph, more text, nearly illegible, and it's really tedious to try and read. If we switch to a text typeface, it's a lot easier to process what's written on the display. And this can happen with weights too. A good example of this is thin or ultra thin. There are a lot of thin font options out there. And for a few words or even a heading, they can look pretty great. But when you try and write out paragraphs using ultra thin text, it's tedious and almost painful at times. A lot of typefaces work for both options, and that's okay. As a general rule, if you're using more decorative or complex typefaces, it's good to limit those to headings. In longer paragraphs, long strings of text, it helps to choose a text typeface, anything that's legible at a smaller size with lots of words, usually less complexity. But that's display typefaces and text typefaces. Considering how you're using that typeface can really help you pick the right typeface for whatever part of your design you're working on. Of course, sometimes it's not that easy. A lot of typefaces can be used in a lot of ways. It might be a lot of pressure if you've set out to find the perfect typeface. Sometimes it's great to pick a time-tested classic and focus on using it extremely well. Then there are superfamilies. Many times these pair together different typefaces like PT serif, which has little serifs on the L's and the I's and M's and lots of other characters. And this looks great in text. For the heading, we have PT sans, which is just that, sans serif, no serifs. We check twice before filming. Same with Source Sans Pro and Source Serif Pro. Superfamilies like this are specifically designed to pair nicely. Now, next part. We throw around terms like typeface and font all the time. A typeface is the design of the type itself. This is Garamond or Arial or any name for the style and the shape of the characters themselves, the letters, the numbers, the symbols. And a font family, this is any grouping of related fonts, like the Arial font family, which would include Arial Bold Italic, etc. We're all thinking the same thing. Isn't that suspiciously similar to how we described a typeface? Yes. Even though there are historical distinctions, when we're talking about design principles, especially on the web, we can often use typeface and font family interchangeably. So then what's a font? On the web, or in general computing, fonts are the files themselves. The font is a specific file that contains a full set of these characters. One font would be Futura Medium Italic. But here's the thing. Because we're using these files, because we're picking typefaces using font files in different software, the terms are used a bit more interchangeably. So if someone says, what typeface is that? You can say Arial. If they say, what font is that? You can also say Arial. In either case, you can get even more specific and say Arial Bold or Myriad Pro Condensed or Times New Roman Italic. If you're talking to a professional typographer, these distinctions can help in conversation, so you can be as specific as possible. But more widely, we often use all three of these interchangeably. And that leads us to some general typography guidelines. Unless you have a solid reason, this is number one, unless there's a good reason, it really helps to limit the number of typefaces in a design. There are exceptions to this, but too many typefaces can make it really hard to follow. Our brains are essentially having to context switch fonts. Fontext. Stacy, can we get that domain? If we're constantly switching between too many typefaces, our brains can get overloaded.
It's taken.
The .com?
Yeah.
How about the .net?
Also taken. .biz?
No.
.info?
That's worse.
.club?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Let's do it. That's number 1, generally limiting ourselves to 2 typefaces in a design. Number 2, if you're going to use 2 different typefaces or font families, make sure they're different enough. Why? Font pairings like Arial and Helvetica or Minion and Garamond, these are really close. So when they're too similar, we could change one of them to something without serifs, like Futura, a sans serif font. But what about 2 sans serif fonts? Sometimes designers will choose a heavier weight or heavier typeface altogether on things like headings. And sometimes the best route is to choose 2 things that are noticeably different. But what about inline headings or parts of your paragraph that need focus? Apple does this on their Mac Pro site. They're using the same typeface, almost the same weight, but they're differentiating with color. That's an option too. We can also use a font superfamily, good fonts that are designed to pair nicely. That's number 2, use typefaces or font colors that are different enough. Number 3 is leading. We're talking about line height. Unless there's a reason to do so, and it has to be a pretty good reason. Unless we have a reason, we always want paragraph line height to be at least 125% whatever the font size is. Even that is a little close. So number 3, especially in paragraphs, it's often best to use line heights that equal at least 125%. Number 4, column width. So let's clarify. When lines of text get too wide, people lose their place. This would be in headings, paragraphs. This counts for any string of text that people see on the screen. Look at Stripe's documentation. It's legible. They contain the width of all the text. If that container width didn't exist, someone's eyes have to travel really far horizontally. So we should choose a font size that works and a container width that works. And there are combinations that keep everything at a maximum. A lot of people will recommend a legible limit of somewhere between 75 and 100 characters per line, including spaces. Now, Stripe's documentation section is an excellent example of all of these. Now, it might not be the most visually exciting thing in the history of time, but it's extremely practical and legible. Stripe's documentation has sections and subsections within a single page, and that design, it expertly uses a clean system of typography. They're using Camphor for their display and text headings, and Source Code Pro for parameters and code snippets. Those 2 typefaces, different enough that it's easily discernible at a glance. We know what's code, we know what's not. Text size 15, line height 26, that's over 170%. For the code, that's 13 and 19, which is almost 150%. And they've chosen these sizes and wrapped the whole thing in a container so that all the content is neatly bound. It's legible. You can take a lot of this and apply it to any project you're working on, and that's a great exercise to go through. Choose display and text typefaces, or even pick a set from a superfamily. Think about how many typefaces you're using or not using. Make sure there's enough leading or line height, at least 125%, and keep everything legible. Make sure you're choosing both a size and a container width that makes everything legible. There are tons of sites and resources out there that let you play around with fonts. Adobe Fonts is one, Google Fonts is another. Now, we're gonna use all of this as we dig into the site design for Hayes Valley Interior Design, but that's an overview of typography.